Now, likewise, the Spirit helps us in our weakness, Paul says. What weakness? What weaknesses? I think he's talking about the ones we've been talking about. The sickness and the futility and the frustration and the decay and the despair of life that we endure while on our way from salvation to heaven. While we are here walking with Christ, all those things we endure, those are the things the Spirit is here to help us deal with. And the Greek word for help, not to give you any sort of language lesson, means more than just to give aid. It's not as though we're working and doing these things and He comes alongside us and holds our hand just saying everything's going to be better. But it has this idea of not just lending a hand, but to lay hold of. And so when we begin to understand the Spirit's role in aiding us in our weaknesses, whatever those weaknesses may be, rather than seeing Him bearing you up so that your strength is made a little better, you need to see Him as laying hold of the fullness of all of your weaknesses, taking the full burden of your weaknesses upon Himself. Because in yourself you have no strength. And so that's why it is that Paul can say in 2 Corinthians 12 that in Him our weakness is perfected by His power. So that He not only strengthens us, but He secures our weaknesses and lifts them up as if they were His own. Lifts them up as if they were His own. Sin is a barrier for communion with God, of which the Spirit convicts us so that we repent and restore that sweet communion, so that we lean upon that one who is bearing our weaknesses. David said in Psalm 66, if I regard wickedness in my heart, the Lord will not hear. But certainly God has heard. He has given heed to the voice of my prayer. Who is that voice if not the Spirit? Crying out within us, pleading on our behalf. Who else would have the authority or the closeness in relationship to call upon God as Abba and Father, but if not the Spirit? He supplies grace to us in our time of need. David says, if I regard sin in my heart, if I regard this iniquity, then God will not hear my prayers. He will not listen to me. But he rejoices. Certainly God has heard. He has given heed to the voice of my prayer. He listens because He's provided His Spirit that cries out on our behalf. Therefore, we're content with weaknesses and with insults and with distresses and persecutions and difficulties. For when we are weak, we realize our weaknesses, then we are truly what? Strong. Why? Because we're relying on the one who is strong. And I'm only strong because I'm leaning on Him. And so the Spirit supplies us with all we need to be faithful, effective, protected children of God. And now he'll illustrate our complete and total need for the Spirit and just how helpless we are without Him. Verse 26, that second part. For we do not know what to pray for as we ought, but the Spirit Himself intercedes for us with groanings too deep for words. Our weakness goes so deep, we don't even know how to pray how we should pray. That seems like the most natural, simple thing in the whole world, prayer. I once had someone tell me, we had spent some time in a discipleship group studying what is normally called the Lord's Prayer, as we recited here this morning. And she was very indignant with me after the class was over. I wasn't even leading the class, I just happened to be in the class. And she came up to me very vehemently and said, I don't need to be taught how to pray. Well, I beg to differ. Christ says when you pray, do it like this. That sounds like instruction. Paul says, you don't know how to do it even then. So you have to have the Spirit. We don't even know. Our sin breaks us and it affects us so deeply and so radically that it interrupts what God had otherwise intended to be a communing relationship of sweet fellowship with Him. And so to repair that, He sends Christ who justifies us of our sin by taking the sin on Himself. Then He gives us His Spirit, which seals us so that even though we continue to sin at times, we don't lose our salvation. It's upheld on His merits, on Christ's merits. But then His Spirit even says, and I'm going to communicate with God for you because you just can't even do it. We need Him. Oh, how we need Him.